All right. The dog is now subdued, just chilling with me now. No,
Diana.
Diana's fine. It's Maya. Maya's
Oh,
just in my room now.
Maya. Look, she's just trying to live her best Lady Marmalade life.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Dungeons and Degrees. My name's Adrian. Oh, I forgot my name.
And I'm Alex.
And today we have a special guest. Special guest, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Pat, and I'm the lead designer of Flagbearer Games, publisher of Nations and Cannons.
Yes, I got to talk to Pat at Gen Con. Was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Time is not
I've
real.
lost all concept of it. Right? It's just
There is
dripping
none.
away between our fingertips.
Exactly. But I had a really good conversation talking about Revolutionary War, but into 5e kind of thing. I'm bad at
The what war?
describing
Which one?
things.
I'll give you a hint. The coats were red, also blue, but the red ones are the iconic ones.
Oh, somebody asked me how red are the coats, and I just I don't know if that makes any
You
sense.
did have a moment in the baby Discord where you were like, "What? What does that mean? What are red coats?"
No, I knew what red coats how specific? Do you want the color code or the Home Depot color swatch? What do you want?
My favorite.
That would be the same thing.
Whenever I'm running a game, my favorite just GM gory flavor text is, you shot him through the chest. He collapses in the floor. His coat is now slightly more red than it was before.
I love it. So an offset of blood red. All right, got it.
There you go.
But yeah, how did this become? What was the kind of initiative to create a 5e setting for this?
So I've got an answer for you, and this is a little polished, right? Because I was sort of thinking about it as how to work it into our elevator pitch type of thing. But really, the peanut butter and chocolate of Nations and Cannons, if you trace it back, it comes from two ideas. One, that the action economy of 5e actually works in really interesting ways with flintlock firearms, with these single shot muzzle-loaded weapons that can do a tremendous amount of damage, but also require an action to reload. It does some interesting things to shake up the way that combat unfolds, those dynamics, make cover more important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And number two, which is everyone's favorite, is just sort of the shower thought that Alexander Hamilton absolutely knew vicious mockery. And so you put those two together, right? And you've got, you shake them up a little bit, and you've got a kind of a ready-made, concept for just taking the 5e framework and adapting it into history and just putting all the pieces together and trying to figure out how to orient the game system to actually support gaming in a historical context, in a non-supernatural, fully mundane, 18th century world.
You had to make different classes and kind of I guess teams, or how did that come about? How do you specify, oh, this soldier is specialized in this, and oh, I don't want it to bleed into other characteristics of other classes while making
Can I
this?
also throw in a
Yeah,
secondary
go for it.
question? Are there pre-made characters?
1,000% there are pre-made characters. So if you open up our book in the very first chapter, we talk about origins, right? And we have a system that we've created called roles as a replace for, fantastical races. When you're playing in history, right, everyone's a human, obviously. And the last thing we want to do is to give any type of, gameplay statistic based on, the type of human that you are. So, instead we've created this system called roles, where you pick where you are kind of coming from in the party, how you're aiming to contribute. So, for instance, an officer gets bonus to charisma, and they get an ability where they are commissioned by their nation or their fighting force. They get bonuses on social checks with people who are aligned with that, with patriots and things like that. But they have to maintain their good standing with that army, or they lose that ability. We have other roles like pioneer for the sort of frontiersman aesthetic, scholar, scout, renegade is our kind of catch-all for ne'er-do-wells and folks at the fringes of colonial society. And just coming through and thinking about how we can create, a variety of gameplay experiences from these kind of archetypal things. And then, once you're creating a character, we have some gorgeous character artwork done by an illustrator friend of mine whose name is Giancarlo Montalbano. And these characters are all available as pre-gens. Not only that, but they are all real people pulled from the pages of history, right? Characters like Peter Francisco, who was 6 foot tall in the 18th century, in a time when malnourishment was quite a bit more prevalent than it was today. So that was really a feat at the time, nicknamed Washington's Hercules. Or David Bushnell, the inventor of the submarine. The submarine was basically a oaken casket or a barrel with a propeller stuck on the end, and it didn't perform particularly well, but you know what? It was number one in the record books, and that counts for something. Alan McLean, the ranger captain and scout who infiltrated British-occupied Philadelphia to run special operations. Anna Maria Lane, who is a pioneer and a battlefield nurse who served alongside her husband in essentially disguise, acting and pantomiming as a man in the Continental Army, right? And so all these characters are available as pre-gens for you to download, but we wanted to make sure that we had a pretty robust range of experiences there that people could flip through the book and imagine themselves in the 18th century, imagine themselves as a woman, as a person of color, as an indigenous character. It's super important to us to allow anybody to imagine the past with a kind of a sense of agency, of the ability to tell their own story, and even to imagine, what world might have come out if the revolution had maybe adhered more to its principles. What kind of a more equitable society could have come if you were interested in sort of exploring alternative histories.
What's your favorite role that you've made?
Okay. Renegade is just a lot of fun, right? It's just just diving deep into like smugglers and gamblers and that type of stuff. I really like the scholar role, though. They get an ability called Best Laid Plans, which is at the beginning of combat. When they roll initiative, they can write down an action that they ready in secret, and then it sort of is treated as a readied action that persists across several rounds. And then when the right circumstance is revealed, they can pull out that piece of paper that they've written it down and show it to the GM, aha, and pull out their trap card.
Awesome. That's so cool. I mean, just the idea of like this alternative thing that's outside of the realm of, it has to be an action, reaction, bonus action, but like, you know what? In this specific thing, this triggers off. Like that's so cool.
Yeah, it's specifically, it can't be an attack or an offensive gambit. It's got to be something like using your environment or flipping the lever that's going to cause the rope bridge to collapse with all the soldiers on it. Something like that.
How long did it take to playtest and balance these roles?
It took quite a while, right? This is a product that's been in development for over 3 years now. It started before COVID, right, as a kind of a passion project. And then, we've gone through, we're continually supporting it. We did a refresh with our rules this year. We've addressed a lot of playtest feedback. And then also, we're trying to make ourselves fully compatible with the SRD. So now we've removed all of the references to effects that are in baseline 5e that are really cool effects, but maybe not covered under the system reference document. And so that, going back to my Alexander Hamilton reference, the perfect spell for a character of that disposition to have is compelled duel, right? Like it just flows right off the page. But unfortunately, compelled duel is not part of the Open Gaming License, right? It's one of those new spells that was created for 5e, and so it falls into that limbo area of technically it's copyrighted content. So we didn't want to lose that. We went ahead and we created a new gambit. And gambits are what we create a system similar to how the Artificer functions, where they're spell-like effects, like a trick or a trap that's laid, an inspirational speech, right? Extraordinary abilities, but, things that can be accomplished like by mundane means. And so the one for, or as a replacement for compelled duel is called Code Duello, and this is actually the historical, rules of engagement for gentlemanly duelists, and it's got a whole write-up on dueling etiquette, what the do's and don'ts were, and in high society, a duel was kind of considered to be, you had to respond to it or your honor was at stake, but also it was illegal in certain municipalities or even whole certain nations. So there was this sort of gray area where, depending on where you're coming from, you may even need to break the law to maintain your sense of decorum and your personal dignity, which is a lot of fun, right? If you create abilities like that allow players not only to have an in-combat taunt effectively, but also to use that same ability to level a challenge against the corrupt magistrate in the town that's been bossing them around, right? Or to throw down and challenge the British officer to a duel mano a mano, to abandon the battle, or pick a time and a place and settle this like true gentlemen or gentle persons.
I'm obsessed with this, and I don't know why. I think it's my 30 years of being an American that it's calling to a place in my spirit that I know. I just remember I don't. Right, we started off this conversation before recording of being I literally don't know anything about the Revolutionary War. I completely forgot it. My references from what I was thinking prior to you talking was the 2000 Mel Gibson, The Patriot, right? That's where...
Which is a film that is, I would say, divisive in historian circles.
It's very accurate, right?
Yeah.
Just the perfect American movie. Okay. But while you've been talking, and of course I've been paying attention, so I'm not gonna but my ADD brain, okay, let me look and see what's online, what's on the store. First of all, the artwork is fucking beautiful. This is now an ad for Nations and Cannons. The artwork is literally beautiful. I'm so excited, and not for a single moment was I oh yeah, there were women involved with the Revolutionary War. No, it's all dudes. It's all fuck. What we were fucking, I don't know, sewing goddamn flags. That's what I picture in my brain. But no, there had to have been women. There had to have been people who are from this actual fucking country, and not just white people who are coming in to take it over. But of course there are indigenous people, and seeing all of that gets me inspired to go and do this. But I just think it's really funny that it's we spend a lot of time whining about what's going on in the state of our world, and a lot of it is self-made American problems or self-made Texas problems. but however
we're Texan, we can say that.
However you've laid this out, I'm just so excited for it. I'm sorry to have taken over this podcast. This is now a fan Nations and Canon.
What's the Sun Tzu quote? It's just don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. I will not interrupt a host while they're giving me effusive praise. I'll take it. No, it's very just to level with you guys, right? I think the number one challenge with a product like this is that we're there at Gen Con, we've got a booth, right? And it's the Revolutionary War, and people come up to it and they expect us to be, just presenting a very dry version of history or glossing over things, right? And, I just want to grab people by the lapels and say that, the American Revolution was not this stuffy old white man's war. I mean, that is the group, the sort of rich landed gentry that came out of the war sort of holding all the cards as far as power structures, right? But, by some estimates, a third of the Continental Army did not speak English as their primary language, if at all, right? We're talking Germans, Irishmen, Swedes, and even, indigenous soldiers. By other estimates, a fourth of the Continental Army at certain times was black, right? And they're in the history books, right? But they're kind of glossed over in the conventional narrative. And we want to make this sort of experience about everyone's war, right? To give everyone the capability to dive back into that history and reclaim it and make it part of, their story.
I think it's wild. I love also that there are links to when you go on to the website, if you click on characters, you can actually like see all of the character list, the pre-made list, and get the like background that works for the game, which absolutely. But then you also have the link to the Wikipedia, which is like, mwah, so good for people who are like, ooh, I think I know this, and then like the deep dive. So like honestly, I think it's very cool. And I, as like a teacher, I'm like, this would be real fun with kiddos to get them to also learn about what's going on, because obviously, you know, doing it as a game, although it was a very serious event in history and lives were lost, so there's really not a real joking aspect of it on that side of it, but on the like, we understand the reverence of it, you can play a game. You know, sometimes that's a weird feeling I get sometimes when I think about like
whenever I run the game with kids, right? I mean, like they wanna blow redcoats away, right? You know, like kids are bloody little bastards. You know, they will do. You give them an inch and they will take it, which is great, right? I'm not knocking them at all. What we're kind of trying to do with our kind of educational angle there is to like, anytime you run a D&D game, there's always going to be, you know, it's a combat-oriented system, and it has, you know, that's it's sort of its main pillar. But what we're trying to do is to have, you know, moments of like civics in action where you can kind of see the world through, you know, the perspective of a line soldier or a dissident or, you know, a pamphleteer of the time, right? And imagine, you know, okay, well, it's Valley Forge and nobody has any boots. There's smallpox and dysentery are endemic throughout the camp, right? And there's not enough food to go around. What do you do, right? It's winter quarters, so there is nothing for you to do, and people are rebelling, and the commanding officers are trying to figure out the best way to use their rum rations to distribute them out to the troops to keep them, you know, at least somewhat pacified while they all die of disease, right? It's not a heroic story, but it can be an engaging story, you know, and like you mix moments like that in with like the sort of high octane battle stuff, and you really are able to kind of do like a deeper representation of like a day in the life and the sort of, you know, the moments in civics that entails.
Pat, what is your background? What do you do? Like, what is your... did you walk out and you were like, the Revolutionary War, this calls to me? Like, how did we get to this point?
So I work as a game designer professionally. I work at a small firm that was based out of Brooklyn, at least when physical offices mattered, called Playmatics, and we do a lot of gamification work with nonprofits, journalistic initiatives, healthcare, stuff like that. And that's like looking at complex problems and systems and finding ways to use games and data toys and interactive systems to make them more engaging and more understandable, right, to a common audience. This whole project got its start because I was contracted to make a game for the American Revolution Institute of the Society of the Cincinnati, which is one hell of a mouthful. And that is a free game that's available. You can download it now. I will not feel guilty about plugging it because it is 100% free, no microtransactions, no asks for you to pull out your credit card, just funded by an educational organization. And that's like a combination between the Oregon Trail and civilization, going through the challenges of the American Revolution, the many crises that were faced by the Continental Army, the Continental Congress, and the constituent states, and how they were underfunded, undermanned, they didn't have the resources that they needed, and, you know, very frequently there were choices that needed to be made, you know, declaring martial law, confiscating Tory property, you know, in essence, in some places, instituting a kind of primitive draft or levy system. These are things that infringed on civil liberties of the time, but were necessary, you know, to win the war, to execute this conflict that lasted for over 7 years and was really a war of attrition. And the whole point of that project was to debunk this notion that George Washington just, you know, came out of he sailed across the Delaware and then kicked the British out of Yorktown, and then boom, it's done, right? Like war won, right? It was really this long and storied affair. And you know, over the course